Om Aginati Marandasya Garangana Sarakya Chaksurun Meritam Yanatashmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Sapitam Yanabhutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Tarati Swaparantikam Vandeham Siguru Siddhapat Kamaram Shigurun Vaishnavam Sha Sirupam Sagaditam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sidevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shivishikhan Vitam Shyam Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tito Jayodhira Nashta Priyashu Abhadresu Nityam Bhagatas Bhagati Uttamashoki Bhakti Bhavati Naistaki Nigamaka Padurugaritam Param Shukamakaramaita Samyadam Pibata Bhagatam Rashamarayam Mahora Horisikabuvyakam Krishna Sadhu Bhagate Gamehena Karona Stadu Shamasho Parana Kodinoditam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Thanks very much for joining us, Justin. Who else? Justin primarily, and one other. Gene and Justin on this Monday morning. We're 4 minutes late coming to you. We actually went on Facebook Live exactly at 7:30, as is our custom. However, after a few minutes, I saw that no one was joining us on the live button, and then I realized that I hadn't clicked public. For some reason, when you go from Zoom to Facebook Live, the default setting is private. So unless I remember to reset it for public, it's just me talking to the walls. I've tried to figure out how to make the default setting public. Raleigh, maybe you could consult your genius son, Mohan, about that. But that's why I'm a little bit late, because I was just talking to myself for a while. Then I had to start, close down the Zoom call, open it up again, go through all the procedures to go to Facebook Live a second time. Good morning, Anjali, Hare Krishna. Welcome to MM, Motivational Monday. And we're pretty chuffed here. We have two temples, as you know, in Utah, and the last temple opened in April of 2019. But in order to open it, we had to take out some loans. Some of our members were kind enough to give us non-interest-bearing, interest-free loans. And with that money that we borrowed from our members, we were able to finish the temple, but we still had an outstanding balance of somewhere in the vicinity of high $400,000 owing on the temple. And we thought with the color festivals this year and our wholesale color business, we wouldn't have a great problem in repaying these 1 to 2 year interest-free loans. But then COVID came along. We had to cancel 9 color festivals or 7 color festivals in 3 states. And naturally, nobody else was having color events. So our wholesale color business went away overnight. Hopefully that'll all come back at some time in the future. But the funds that we'd kind of counted on to repay those loans dissipated overnight with COVID. The interesting thing is Krishna takes care of his devotees. We didn't have much income this year beyond what we needed to make our ends meet and pay our expenses. But we did have a couple of months ago, one of our donors, our biggest donor, I'm not going to mention any names here because I don't want to embarrass anyone, but our biggest donor forgave a loan of $208,000, which cut our indebtedness from about $400,000 in half. And last night, one of our frequent listeners, he's on with us right now, made my day yesterday and today and probably for many, many days to come by also forgiving a $20,000, half of what he had loaned to us at that time. So if I'm smiling, and if it's because I've had an extra weight lifted off of my shoulders, and we've gone that much further towards paying off the outstanding debts for having built the Salt Lake City temple. And we're closer to that point at which the temple up there in Salt Lake City will be totally debt-free, as is the temple in Spanish Fork here. So on that buoyant note, let's launch into a new verse this Motivational Monday. We're moving from the 41st verse in the 3rd chapter, 1st canto, on which we spent no less than 5 sessions. Good morning, Jay from London. Well done. Yes, indeed. The well done goes to Krishna. Credit is not ours. Other than that, we took a risk, we stretch. And that's one lesson that, there's devotional service. There's outside of devotional service, which obviously refers to most people. There's devotional service, but within devotional service, there's comfortable devotional service where all your needs are met. And then there's devotional service where you try to have Krishna more personally involved in your life. You try to have Krishna show up and show out in your life in a more visible way. And for that, you can't just stay in your comfort zone, even within devotional service, even within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So I can testify that by stretching our faith and taking a few risks and stepping out of the boats, we've seen Krishna do amazing things, as I've just shared with you recently. Coming to the area 35 years ago with basically no resources, no members, no support. And where we are today, it is all the mercy of God. And he's been seated within the hearts of all our friends, all of our supporters, all of our donors, all of our benefactors. So there's never been a time. We left the comfort of the big iskcon temple in Los Angeles to come here on our own to Utah, a place that's 90% another religion. We weren't the smartest bulbs in the room, but we did have some faith. And if I don't communicate anything else to you in all these sessions, I hope that you have some sort of a takeaway that if you give up your comfort in order to take a risk, stretch your faith for the Lord, you won't be disappointed, but you'll be sitting, having had loans forgiven, with a big smile on your face, like Caru sits before you presently. Thanks for joining us, Jimmy and Taruni. Anjali says, loan forgiveness, ki jai. Thanks for joining us, Govinda Dev. Here we go. New verse. No telling how many days we'll spend on this. Satu samsrayavan asha maharajam pariksitam paryo pavishtam gangayam paritam paramashabhi. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, in his turn, Sukadeva was the recipient of the Srimad Bhagavatam from his great father Vyasadeva. Mahamuni Kimbhapada. Vyasadeva is the literary incarnation of God. The Srimad Bhagavatam, the beautiful story of the Absolute Truth, is his summum bonum. And wanting to entrust it to the best person, he gave it to none other than his son, Sukadeva Goswami. And Sukadeva Goswami was already a liberated soul from his previous birth. And then he became Krishna consciousness once the Srimad Bhagavatam was transmitted to him. And as it had been transmitted to Sukadeva Goswami, then according to this verse, Sukadeva Goswami went right from the ashram of his father to the assembly of sages on the banks of the Yamuna/Ganges, where Maharshi Parikshit was observing a 7-day fast and vigil until the time of his death. Sukadeva was immediately recognized as being totally Krishna conscious. He had no clothes on. His complexion was the same bluish gray complexion of Krishna, probably not too dissimilar from the clouds there behind me. So everybody present there, and there were many qualified philosophers, scholars, yogis, and ascetics, authors, they all immediately deferred to Sukadeva Goswami as the best and most transparent via media to Krishna. And so it says here, Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, in his turn delivered the Bhagavatam to the great Emperor Parikshit, who sat surrounded by sages on the bank of the Ganges awaiting death without taking food or drink. You say, what? I can understand 7 days without eating. It's generally believed by scholars and practitioners in the area that you can fast for up to 40 days with absolutely no physical harm, unless, of course, you have some pre-existing medical condition. But a healthy person can fast up to 40 days. It's been done many, many times with not only no physical harm, but positive health benefits from food, that is. But You're not supposed to be able to fast from water for more than 3 days without putting your life in jeopardy. Apparently Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami were on such a sublime transcendental level that they didn't need the gross nourishment that we need on a regular basis to support us. And so it says that not only did Maharaj Parikshit, and presumably Sukadeva Goswami as well, not only fast from food for 7 days, which is doable, but they also fasted from water. Can you imagine? After a day or 2 days, anybody that's ever observed Nirjal Ekadasi, Jal means water, Nir means without. There's one day a year where not only do we not eat grains, but you have the option of not drinking water. And that's the toughest fast day of the year. Fasting from food for 24 hours is uplifting, it's refreshing, it's purifying. But if you've been fasting from water for 24 hours, you're feeling usually pretty down, pretty dried out, pretty miserable. That was the case with these two great souls. It says, man does not live by bread and water alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. That's a quote from the Bible, but we see it utilized, we see it employed practically here by Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, who for 7 days lived not by food or water, but they were sustained by the words of God as enunciated in the pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Here's the verse. This is the 26th verse of Prashant's with us yet. Good morning, John. Yes, Prashant's here. All right, everybody raise their arms. Hari Bo, Prashant. Prashant finds those references and gives us the links that we can track them down afterwards. This is a verse that I've memorized many years ago because it's a striking verse. Second canto, 8th chapter, 26th verse. Name Shobho Parayanti Brahma Anashanimene Pibato Chitopirasham Tad Bhaktyabdi Vinishatam. Pibato means drinking. Oh, learned Brahmins, Maharaj Parikshit addresses the assembly. Because of my drinking the nectar, he's drinking. Normally when we think of drinking through the mouth, and then it goes to the stomach. And then that hydration disperses itself throughout the body. But the kind of drinking that Parikshit Maharaj is talking about is drinking through the ears, the nectar. Pibanti te bhagavatam atmana katam punanti te vishyavidusharam rajanti tux charanor soror hantikam. He's talking about a more important type of drinking. When you drink water through the mouth and it goes to the stomach, you sustain this temporary physical body, which is our residence for 60 or 70 or so years. And then it passes away. Antavanti me deha nitya sukta siddhira anasino paramesh tajmadya yashva bharata. But when you drink the topics of Krishna through the ear, it nourishes the soul, which is eternal. So many people get distracted by the external body. They work hard. They go into ethical gray areas. They commit crimes simply for the sake of the concentrated selfishness, which is this physical body, extended selfishness, which is family, friends, country. They compromise themselves in so many ways in order to make a more comfortable situation in this brief finger snap, which is our human form of life. Those who are actually intelligent, guided by realized souls, like Sukadeva Goswami, they prioritize the drinking through the ears of the eternal, always fresh, enlivening pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that reaches the heart. And when the heart is satisfied, that's the resident, the soul, which is 1/10,000th the size of a tip of a hair, sits within the heart. When blood goes through the heart, and when the blood goes into the heart, it's recycled regularly, and the blood it gets fatigued. The blood gets tired after it's done its circuit through the body. And then the blood recycles through the heart, and then the blood gets recharged. It gets reoxygenated. And that's how we have vitality. That's what we have energy, vigor. And that oxygenational process is driven by the presence of the eternal spirit soul accompanied by the super soul within the region of the heart. So literally, we are physically as well as spiritually driven and motivated and sustained by nothing other than the spirit soul residing within the heart. So how foolish it is, and how unimportant it is. Even a poor man in India with an acre of land can support himself and his family by working 3 months a year. Simple farmer, maybe he's got 1 cow for milk, and he can grow everything he needs on his land, and what he doesn't need, he can trade the excess crops. 3 months a year, he works hard, planting, weeding, harvesting, and that's enough. Even a farmer with 1 acre of land has 9 months leisure time. To maintain your body, to feed yourself and your family, keep a roof over your head, is relatively easy. We've made it difficult because of all the inequities and the greed of certain classes of men who have far more resources than what were meant as their quota, and then leaving others without even decent drinking water and decent food. But God, our supreme loving Father, has given us a planet which is more than adequately supplied with all the necessities of life. The animals, they have to struggle day after day after day, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. But we humans are in a very special position. And we don't have to work hard all day, every day. With 3 months of work out of 12 months of the year, a simple farmer can maintain himself and his family with all the necessities of life. Gandhi said the world supplies enough for our need, doesn't necessarily supply enough for our greed. And the balance of time we can save for the main business of life, which is not eating food through the mouth. That's secondary. But the primary duty of the human form of life is to drink the topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the ears, let them come into the region of the heart, feed the soul, enliven the soul, so that when that day comes that this body drops due to the force of gravity and the spinning out of the time factor, and the soul goes back to home, back to God. So what's at stake here is immortal life versus eating, drinking, sleeping, and mating. So here, Maharaj Pariksit sets the perfect example of how to make one's human life successful. And it's important to note that he had many people from whom he could potentially hear. There were a lot of sages gathered there when they heard that the king of the world had only 7 days to live. All the elevated personalities dropped what they were doing and came, and they didn't want him to go alone into that sweet night. They wanted to accompany him. So he had many philosophers, scholars. But it's important that he waited. He asked Tatas Java Pichami Bambiche Visrabi Bipa Itikriyatam Sarvatman Mimanas Chakitam Suda Chitatam Sadyabhukta. He said, what is the duty of all men in all circumstances, especially one who's about to die? He asked that question, and a few people put forward some proposals, and they offered to expound further and elaborate. And he said, no, let's just wait a while. Let's just wait a while. He put them off, and then finally Sukadeva Goswami appeared as the answer to his prayers. And what were his prayers? That I hear the Katha, the stories about the name, fame, form, pastimes, and paraphernalia of the Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality, from a realized soul, not just from any scholar or speculator or author or advanced yogi or ascetic. I must hear it from one who is a lover, a true and blue lover of God. And although Maharaj Pariksit heard it for only 7 days, we can hear it. He knew he had 7 days to live, and so he took that time in order to do the most important thing. But not only should one seek out a realized soul, a bona fide spiritual master from whom to hear the topics of the Bhagavad, because the topics are pure, but you also have to hear them from a pure soul. It says, Avaishnavam Mukodiram Putam Harikadam Shravana Maiva Kartavyam Sarpo Chistam Yata Pata. There's some alliteration there. It says milk is very nourishing, but when it's touched by the lips of a snake, then it has poisonous effects. So the very fact that Maharaj Parikshit was able to hear for 7 days without eating or drinking indicates that he was hearing the real flow of nectar from the lips of a bona fide spiritual master, Sukadeva Goswami. Otherwise, if the topic is mundane and if the speaker is mundane, how can anybody sit in rapt attention, fasting from food and water for 7 days? You'd be exhausted. You'd be tired after an hour. You might have read books of fiction and some books you really liked. Maybe you have a favorite author or two from the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or Publishers Weekly's best-selling list, a real page-turner, something that kept you up all night on this edge of your seat. But how many times you read that book? And did you ever discuss it or relish it? Is it such a book that you could read it all day, every day, and still get newer and newer insights from it? No. You become exhausted very soon by hearing from hackneyed ways of thinking from mundaners. No one can become satisfied by hearing useless speculations, fiction, mysteries, made-up stories. One will quickly get tired and exhausted. Also, one has to prepare oneself also. Not only was Sukadeva Goswami a qualified speaker, but Maharaj Parikshit was a qualified hearer. He had a taste for the subtle and the sublime, not the gross. It says, Atmaramas chamuneo negranti abhi kurugone kurvanti hypatigam itam bhutam ganahari. Mundaners are interested in conspiracies and love affairs and battles. And we find those same elements in the pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But realized transcendentalists have no attraction for the Ben-Hurs and the brave hearts of this material world. They have given up ruminating over those hackneyed topics long time ago, and yet we observe them sitting in rapt attention, hearing about the pastimes of the Lord. That is to their credit, because there's nothing itam bhutam ganahari, there's nothing mundane about the heroism of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. So not only must the speaker be qualified, but the listener must be qualified as well. There's a funny story from the life of Tukaram. Tukaram is a great Krishna Bhakta from Maharashtra. One day he was doing Harikatha, speaking about the pastimes of Krishna, and he was certainly a qualified speaker. Not only would speak, but he would sing his abhangas, his songs. And the hall was jam-packed with devotees. So Sukaram was a pure devotee of Lord Vital there in Pandapur. He was narrating the pastimes of the Lord and singing until it became very, very late at night. And as the hour got less and less and less and less, slowly, devotees who had things to take care of at home started getting up and going to home to take some sleep there, maybe with the intention of rejoining him for the Gita on the following night. But it came past the midnight hour. Tukaram had his eyes closed, and he was reciting in an ecstatic trance, and he opened his own. And when he opened his eyes at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, he saw only one devotee who appeared to be sitting in front of him in rapt attention. And he said to this soul survivor, you might say, "You're such a nice devotee. You have so much devotion in your heart that although everyone else is left, you're sitting there and relishing Harikatha." And this sole occupant of the room, big hall, said, "Maharaj, please do not have such a misunderstanding. I am unfortunately not that attached to Harikatha. The fact that I'm sitting so long and hearing is that the blanket on which you're sitting and doing Harikatha belongs to me, and in order to take that, I'm waiting until you get up. So it's a case where this speaker was qualified, but the recipient was not. Now here's another instance from the life of Tukaram, where the speaker and the subject matter is not of the nature of pure devotional service. Tukaram was certainly a qualified speaker, qualified hearer, but this is another instance here which shows the opposite point, that the speaker must be bona fide and the subject matter should be the pure topics of the Lord as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So once it chanced that a certain Brahmin, who was not a pure devotee, had copied out Mukund Raja's book Vivaha Sindha, which apparently relegates the Supreme Personality of Godhead to an impersonal, ineffable force rather than a Supreme Divine Personality. So he visited Tukaram and he asked Tukaram's permission to read this book to him. And Tukaram didn't want to be impolite or to discourage the Brahmin. He granted him permission. The Brahmin sat down before him and prepared to read, and Tukaram said, just one request I have, so that I can pay better attention and not be distracted by things going on around me. Would you mind if I draped a blanket over my body while you recite? The Brahmin thought that was a little peculiar, but he had no objection. So for several hours he read from the impersonalistic book, during which time Tukaram sat like a rock underneath his blanket. He neither stirred nor spoke until at length the Brahmin lifted up a corner of the blanket to see what was going on with Tukaram, and he saw Tukaram there with his fingers in the holes of his ears. The Brahmin said, "What's going on here? Why are you wasting my time stopping up your ears with your fingers?" Tukaram explained. He said, "I cannot listen to this impersonalistic commentary that says that God and his worshiper are one." Tukaram went on to say that between God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Aishwarya Samagasha Viryasya Yasasasya Gyanam Vairagya Sarampakam Chitindaram, who is full of 6 opulence of wealth, strength, fame, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation. Between him and his devotees, the Lord is infinitely equipped with all opulences to an unlimited degree, and we, his parts and parcels, are infinitesimal living beings, limitedly reflecting some small part of his fame, wealth, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. So between the Lord and his parts and parcels, Tukaram said, the Lord has drawn a line. And we're not meant to erase the differences between ourselves and the Lord. Granted, we're qualitatively one with the Lord. He's spirit, we're spirit. He's eternal, we're eternal. He's full of knowledge, we have some knowledge. He's blissful, we also have the tendency to be joyful on a smaller scale. But the difference, the line the Lord has drawn between the living being, the part and parcel, and the whole is in terms of quantity. The infinitesimal can never become one with or synonymous with the infinite. That's not possible. Little stud of gold that some man or woman will put in their ear has the same quality as a gold mine, but it will never have the same value as the gold mine. So we must observe the line of distinction that God has drawn between himself and his devotees. That no matter what we do, no matter how much we learn or how much we build up our strength or how good looking we make through Botox or cosmetic surgery, we don't have the power to create, preserve, and destroy on the same level of God. So as long as God creates, maintains, and destroys to an unlimited degree millions and millions of material and spiritual universes, we should be humble and not claim to identify with him. A joke just came to mind. A lady, she had a life-threatening condition, she went into the hospital in order to get surgery. And the surgery was successful. They'd removed the cancers and tumors which had threatened her life. She was so happy. She actually, during the surgery, she had an out-of-body experience, and she said, am I going to survive this surgery? And God said, oh yeah, you're going to survive, and you've got another 30 years of life left. So she went back into her body. And then after she woke from the anesthesia, she said to the doctor, seeing as how I'm in the hospital, could you do a whole tummy tuck and facial makeover? Just open up your whole bag of tricks and give me a complete makeover, which she did. 6 weeks later, with a new face and new muscle tone and less flab around her middle, this newly made over lady emerges from the hospital. They wheelchair her to the curb. She gets up out of the wheelchair and begins to walk to the parking lot when a bus runs a stop sign and flattens her. She gets to the pearly gates and she says, God, I thought you gave me another 40 years to live. God's purported in this joke to say, oh my God, I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you. Anyway, getting back on topic here, Prabhupada says, all transcendental messages are received in the chain of disciplic succession called parampara. Unless the Bhagavatam and other Vedic literatures are received through this authorized bona fide parampara system by which the knowledge, we don't ascend, we don't climb any sort of a ladder so that we can then comprehend the name, form, qualities, and attributes of God. But if we assume a humble position, often devotees ask the Lord to accept them as an atom at the lotus feet of the Lord. Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam. Patitam means, Lord, I am so fallen. I am your part. I am your servant. So please accept me as a servant, as an atom at your lotus feet. In that humble mood, then the Lord causes knowledge to go from the top down through the chain of successions and blesses the disciple with transcendental knowledge. Otherwise, other than humble, selfless devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, there's no way to attain or access transcendental knowledge about the Lord. So unless that knowledge comes originally from the bona fide literatures and it's passed down through the line of succession by bona fide spiritual masters, then there's no benefit from hearing. It's just a mundane exercise which doesn't yield any profit to the speaker or the listener. When we read the Bhagavad Gita, we have to take the prescriptions from within the Bhagavad Gita itself. And right in the beginning, there are 18 chapters, so in the relative beginning, the first chapter is just describing the scene and the characters who are present on the battlefield. And the second chapter talks about the nature of the soul. And the third chapter talks about how you have to work in devotion, work not for preserving this physical body, but work for attaining higher consciousness. And then right in the second verse of the fourth chapter, Krishna says, if you want all this to come together, if you want all this to gel, and here's the key, evam parampara praptyam imam virjarshevadu sakalina mahata yoga nashta parantapa. I'm looking at my screen here and I can see 4 comments at any given time. And 3 of them are from Prashant. He just came up with that verse from the Shiksha Shakam. He came up with the verse from Vishnu Purana about the 6 opulences of the Lord. And we also have the verse about milk touched by the lips of a serpent. So I'm feeling him hot behind me, hot on my trail. And I don't doubt that we're going to have this verse pop up in the comment section momentarily. So Prabhupada translates this verse, which is spoken by Krishna. The science of the Supreme was received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appeared to be lost. If someone takes the knowledge of Krishna as a Supreme Personality, who is our Creator, our benefactor, um, who is our object of ultimate love and affection and service, who is in fact personifies the very essence of existence and perfection for all of us living beings. Someone takes that and twists it and perverts it and speculates on it. That is a great disservice to humanity. Shruti, smiti, pananadi, pancharet, aikantiki hiru bhaktirut patayava kalpate. Those literatures and those commentaries on those literatures which do not bring us in humility to the lotus feet of the Lord are a great disservice. We might even go so far as to say that the purveyors of such unbona fide speculations are demoniac. Prabhupada says here, as soon as the original purpose of the Gita, which is undivided, selfless, devotional service, loving devotional service, LDS, for all of you members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints out there, as soon as the LDS, loving devotional service point of the Bhagavad Gita was scattered by the motives of unscrupulous commentators, then the disciplic succession became broken. The very reason that Krishna appeared on the earth 5,000 years ago and created the environment and the circumstances by which he spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna was that in due course of time, due to the unbona fide commentaries of unscrupulous, parentheses, demoniac speculators, the real meaning of the Gita had been lost. Imam vivashate yogam proktavam mahamyavyam vivashon manave manarikshakavi. In the beginning of creation, Krishna says, I originally spoke this science of devotional service to the sun god Vivasvan. Vivasvan passed it down to Ikshvaku. Ikshvaku passed it down to Manu. And in this way, through the succession of saintly kings, this knowledge was passed down for thousands and thousands of years through generations and generations of men. Nashnam mohasham. But in due course of time, it was broken. The purity of it was tainted by some unauthorized commentaries inserting themselves in there. Therefore, Krishna says, I'm appearing now, which is 5,300 years ago, to reestablish the knowledge and to reestablish the disciplic succession. So in the same way, now, 5,000 years after the Lord spoke the original or repeated the original Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, there are also so many unauthorized editions of the Bhagavad Gita, especially in the English language. When Prabhupada wrote, translated and delivered to us his Bhagavad Gita and purports as it is, sometime in the late 60s, early 70s, he said in his introduction to the Gita, at that time there were more than 2,000 other commentaries of the Bhagavad Gita, not one of which illuminated the main theme of the Bhagavad Gita or even shed light on the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna. Now I've heard there's even up to more than 5,000 or 6,000 different commentaries, and you'll look for Krishna Bhakti in vain throughout all those voluminous commentaries. Prabhupada says there are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Krishna. The spirit is demoniac because the demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of God. Just like Ravana. Ravana, he wanted to enjoy Ram's wife, but he didn't want to serve Ram. He wanted to enjoy the property of God, but he didn't want to serve God. Similarly, someone wants to make a name for himself as a great scholar, a great commentator. So instead of writing his own book and going forward on his own merits to succeed or fail, he wants to cheat because the Bhagavad Gita is already the most famous book in all of human spiritual history. And so he wants to ride on the coattails of the Bhagavad Gita. Say, this is the Bhagavad Gita by Christopher Isherwood, or this is the Bhagavad Gita by Nikalananda Swami. And so they put their name up there in association with the name and the work of Krishna. But that's not authorized, and that's not going to do you any good to read those unauthorized speculative comments. Once more, later on in the 4th chapter, just to emphasize this point, again, there are many medicines in the apothecary shop, and medicines do have different results for different diseases, and they also are prescribed according to the severity of the diseases. And so if you want to understand the Bhagavad Gita, then you have to take the prescription according to the Gita itself. How does the Gita recommend that you understand it? And here we find in the 4th chapter, 34th verse, Tad vidi panipanena paripashnena seva upadaksanti te jnanam jnanastatvadarshana. Just try to learn the truth, Krishna says, by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they've seen the truth. So out of all the thousands and thousands of copies of the Bhagavad Gita, only one is called Bhagavad Gita as it is. If you're a spiritual inquirer, a spiritual seeker out there, and you have some other copy of the Bhagavad Gita and you want to know what I'm talking about, you can reach me in the comment section. You can email me at utahkrishnas@gmail.com. I'll arrange for you to PayPal me $10 and I'll send you out, maybe we'll have to charge some shipping. I'll send you out a copy, a hardback copy, 800 pages with full color illustrations, the Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Gita is spoken by Krishna. Krishna explains He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He says that loving devotional service, LDS, is the highest activity making one's human life successful. And so if you'd like to get the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna spoke and get the point that Krishna's making and make your life successful, and you don't have that already, then please avail yourself of the opportunity. Contact me or any one of the 800 temples of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Get yourself a copy of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And we're here. We're standing by to answer any questions you might have. There's an excellent website, www.krishna.com, krishna.com, which will answer every question that you ever had. Otherwise, if you want to ask me or anybody, we're only too happy to answer your questions. It is said that when you ask a Hare Krishna a question, he's just as happy as if you'd given him $5,000. In fact, someone just gave us a $20,000 loan forgiveness for what we owe on the Salt Lake City temple. And so I'm smiling. I've got a $20,000 smile this morning. But if you want to see me with a $25,000 smile tomorrow morning, just order your copy of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, or ask me a question in the comments section here. That pretty much does it for Motivational Monday and our first session on this, the 42nd verse in the 3rd chapter of the 1st canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. As always, Prashant, thank you for the amazing service that you do. I'm just looking at all these verses in black and white. The latest one is Tadvini Pranipatena. I'm seeing 4 comments. It doesn't allow me to see more than that. But along with the verses given to us by Prashant is Ram Kishore Das. And those who have liked this broadcast, let me see if I can bring that information. I'm going to click here. I don't know what happens when I click. Oh gosh. Yeah, something bad. Something bad happens. Anyways, oh, wait a minute. Here, okay, here we are. Terry and Taruni, Manasa Ganga, Justin, Govinda Dev, Sundari Priya, Ram Kishore again, Rakesh, thanks for joining us, Nina Richie, Gora Das E, Carla Anderson, thanks for joining us, John Malik, the music instructor for most of our kirtaniyas there in Salt Lake City, Anjali, our old friend, Govinda Bhaktidas, thanks for joining us, and thanks for liking, Nirmala Devi, Gail Rasangi, Michelle, and Greg, thank you. And then there are 3 more that I can't see here. Go ahead and ask any questions. If you haven't liked already, let us know you're there. And share also with different forums, different groups, and different friends. Thank you so much once again for being with us on this Motivational Monday. We'll be back with more thoughts on this nectarine verse from the beautiful story of the Absolute Truth tomorrow, Transcendental Tuesday. In the meantime, keep smiling, keep chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.